Welcome to Mastering Your Monday podcast. And this is the show that talks about boundaries, work-life balance, and living a life where you have control. This is for highly driven professionals who want to develop a more balanced professional and personal life and live out their true values. Those who are ready to grab the reins and change the status quo. The professional who's ready to have a life again and who's ready to take a stand, living in a way that you feel respected, valued, and fulfilled each and every day. We talk about topics like setting boundaries, taking risks, life management, and all the tips, techniques, and strategies to help you master your Monday, one day at a time. Hey, Michelle O'Neill here, and I am so excited to be here for episode 3 of Mastering Your Monday podcast. As you know, I love a great conversation. So come on, pull up a chair, ringside that is, and let's talk the real deal about boundaries. And so you're asking yourself, why boundaries? Because I can just about bet if you're dealing with anything in your life that you're dissatisfied with, the issue is probably somewhere in there, there's some missing boundaries. So, for instance, if you're spending most of your day putting out fires, losing your train of thought, and just dropping the ball, feeling like you're forgetting things and not following through with things, and in the middle of the train of thought can't remember what you were going to say or where you put something. If you feel that no one, absolutely no one can do it as good or as quick as you can, or even it's just easier to take care of it yourself. And I know I've been there, because there's a lot of times, even cooking, cleaning, all those things, whatever you do, working, when I have a project to do, it's always way more easier for me to do it myself than to take the time to train someone else. But what you're doing in that process is you're not allowing someone else to grow by doing it for them. And that's with our kids, with our coworkers, with our team, whatever it is, we have to allow the opportunity for others to grow. And then finally, if you feel that you're so overwhelmed and over committed, that you have so many time pressures and unmet obligations, then I definitely know the issue is boundaries. Maybe not the whole issues. There's some other underlying things there, but I'm sure boundaries somewhere will ease up some of that tension. So there are 3 things that I really want to focus on today. Why boundaries are important, because we really have to understand why they're important before we put them in place. And then taking ownership. We're talking about ownership and responsibility, because that's what boundaries are. And then finally, where do I start? Where do I start putting these boundaries in place? Now that I understand that that is the crux of the problem, now that I understand that that's something that I have the issue with, how do I start putting these things in place? So I want you to think this way. When you're playing a game, answer me this, or as they say on Batman, riddle me this. If you're doing something, if you're playing a game, what is, and you want to win, what is the number one thing that you have to have? Now we're saying Ruby cubes, spades, um, whatever the game is, Uno, whatever the game is, when you're playing a game, what is the number one thing you need to win? Ding, 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 ding. Okay, I'll give you the answer. It's strategy. You need a strategy. Every game that you intend to win in life needs a strategy. So, strategy is Well, actually, it's your game plan. If you want to win it, you have to have a strategy. If you're playing chess, if you're playing checkers, whatever you're playing, there's a strategy to actually winning that game. And boundaries is the rules of that game. So we have the game of life, and boundaries are the rules that we put or eject in our life to win the strategy of life. Boundaries is like your ace in the hole. That's your joker. That's your way of when things look down, you just pop up that thing. If you ever played spades, you know how people used to pop that card on the table. That's your boundaries. You just pop that baby out. So boundaries are the rules of the game, your ace in the hole, your wild card, and you can use this wild card at any time. So don't be hesitant to pull it out. So before we go further, I want you to think of I want to leave you with a couple of equations, okay? And I want you can write these down. And I would encourage you to write these down. And the reason why is because this is going to help you remember this. So, first of all, boundaries plus strategy, it equals WIN. It's a win. When you have boundaries in your life and you have a strategy, put those babies together and you have a win. But remember this also, second equation, less boundaries you have equals the less space that you have in your life. So if you don't have boundaries in your life, you don't have space and peace. So I need to say that again. The less boundaries you have equals space and peace. And so the less boundaries that you have, the less space in your life and the less peace in your life you have. And finally, strategy times wisdom. And part of that wisdom is having great boundaries. That equals exponential winning. So having boundaries in your life is all part of the wisdom along with our experiences and other things. And if we times that with strategy, oh my goodness, we have exponential winning. So just like in our personal lives, in our professional lives also, we have to set limits. It's so important to our ability to command respect, and we're always talking about respect, you know, RESPECT. We want respect and we want to lead with authority, but you can't have those if you don't have boundaries in your life. We're constantly giving to others, taking care of others, fixing others, when a lot of times they don't even ask you to fix them. And let me tell you a secret. You can't fix nobody. But at the end of the day, you are running on fumes and you're completely depleted. So that's why boundaries are important for your, remember, peace and space. And then we're not finding the time to even, have the inclination to really care about ourselves, our mind and our bodies. About again, we're going back to that peace. It is so important that we take that time. And this year, I want to get a little personal here. This year, that is something that I really started incorporating in my life. I am a giver. I am a fixer. I am the person that if you want something done, I'm the person to go to. If you want to make sure that something is taken care of, I'm the person to go to. But I was doing those things to the detriment of my own health. And so I finally realized that I have to take time for me. And it isn't necessarily a big time, but I had to put those limits in place that there are certain things that I need to do for my peace of mind. You know, it was even to the point of have you ever been there and you could actually feel the hairs rising on your head? Like little things were just touching the nerve centers in your scalp, and it was because of stress and anxiety. So I knew that I had to start taking time for myself, and that's the boundary that I start putting in place. And it wasn't anything big, just sometimes of having 20 minutes to myself, 5 minutes to myself, having a nice glass of tea or coffee and just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. But those are the limits that I had to place on my life. So you need to take time to care for your mind and your body. And it was a simple thing as taking a walk each day outside. And why was that so important? Because I got to take my mind off of other things. I got to allow that creativity to expand, and I got to soak in my environment and realize that there's a lot more than just me and my little bitty world. So that's why it's so important that we take that time, um, and care for ourselves. And until we go on strike sometimes with our families or with our even at our workplace, we are putting our own physical and mental needs on the back burner. There are times that you literally have to go on strike. If someone asks, well, who's going to do the agenda for this meeting? I don't know. But I'm not. And you have to take that stand sometimes. You will find yourself so many times taking on other people's duties because you can do it quicker or you can do it faster. And after a while, they start expecting you to do these things. And this is the same thing at home. There are times that you continue to pick up behind others, and after a while they're, oh, I'll just throw it down there, she'll pick it up. Well, no, I think sometimes you have to go on strike and let it pile up and let it not get done. It wasn't your responsibility in the first place. So they will deal with their consequences of their actions. And these are the things that we have to do. If we're not putting these boundaries in place at work, then we most definitely are usually not putting them at place in home, because that's part of our character. If you're a people pleaser, if you're a person who feels that you have to prove yourself, if you feel that no one is going to pay attention to you unless you're excellent all the time, which is a good thing, but not when it's somebody else's job. If you're always doing that, you're probably not doing that at home too. And so you begin to feel overwhelmed and overcommitted, not only in your workplace, in your business, at your church, at your home, at your social club, because I can just about bet if you're taking on responsibilities one place, you're probably the same person who's going to take on responsibilities somewhere else. And a lot of times, those responsibilities are not your responsibilities. But if you don't do this, a lot of times we feel like a failure. You feel like there's a sense of failure and in being unable to meet that mountain of expectations that you find yourself climbing and never getting to the top of done because of the expectations you put not only on yourself, but that others put on you. But the one that you can control is the one that you put on yourself. And so, what do we do? What is something that indicates or fixes a limit? Well, it's the subject today. It's boundaries. It's like your front yard. when you have a front yard and you don't want everyone walking on it. And I remember in my neighborhood walking around, and I guess someone got tired of other people's dogs using the restroom on their lawn. So they had this sign on their lawn, but not only did they have this sign, they also had what I call that that tape that they usually put around crime scenes, so that crime scene tape, but the tape read, "This is not a dog watering ground." And evidently, I guess the dogs were killing their grass. But they set the limit and they put something in place, a boundary, that tape, to make sure no one crossed the limit. And if they crossed the limit, there were probably consequences. So there are healthy guidelines that we need to keep in our life to identify our safe and permissible limits. Boundaries are really about where I end and you begin. And I don't want you to be in my space. And I don't mean physical space, but we have to know our identity and where we end and others begin. We also want to talk about our ownership and responsibility. So one of the things, and I already said it before, just before, is it's doctors Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend who actually say, define me and what's not me. That's what they say boundaries do. A boundary shows me where I end and someone else begin. And it really leads to a bit of ownership, a sense of ownership. It really teaches others how to treat us. And it's just like we teach our kids, we need to teach others how to treat us. I remember growing up, I had a bit of a mouth. And my mom used to say, "Girl, you better watch your tone." And that was my boundary, or I should say my warning. I guess maybe the arm was the next boundary. But anyway, but we put boundaries and we deal with boundaries all throughout our lives, but it's important that we incorporate them also in our life. So boundaries are so important because they provide protection against major violations on our lives. Boundaries provide protection against manipulation. When others want to take advantage of us or talk us into doing things, if we have a boundary in place, if we know what our core values and beliefs are, then it's easier for us to say no because we know what we will and will not allow. No boundaries in our life always leads to a lack of control. We can't control others. And a lot of times we don't control ourselves because we need boundaries in our lives also in reference to substance abuse or any type of abuse or overuse of things, overeating, over smoking too much, whatever your vice is, there are boundaries we need to put in place. And it all boils down to there being an unbalance. When we're doing all these things for everyone, when we're working so hard to make sure we please everyone and do the things that they need, then we have an unbalanced life because we're spending so much time on everyone else that nothing is being done for us. And then usually one area takes over and another one loses. So we need to incorporate a sense of balance. And we won't talk about balance this time, but I got something for you about balance and the myth of balance. And then the final thing I want to say is when we don't put boundaries in place, we put ourselves often in toxic relationships. And so it's so important to identify these toxic relationships, but not only to identify them and understand them what they are and be able to recognize them before it's too late, but to also start erecting the boundaries in place so that you don't find yourself going down that rabbit hole. The thing is that we have to release that guilt of putting those boundaries up because we feel that responsibility, and if we put that boundary in place, they're going to be mad at us, or they're going to treat us a certain way, or that's not the way a mom's supposed to be. A mom is supposed to be available to be able to take her kids to this or that. A dad is supposed to be the breadwinner and make sure he makes all this money and do this, and then he has to take the kids here and whatever, all these roles. There's a balance to these roles. So you need to release yourself from that guilt and look at these things objectionally. We're only responsible for ourselves. Remember that. Repeat after me. Come on. We are only responsible for ourselves. But yes, we are to help others. We're to help others, but not do it for them. We have a responsibility to them as a fellow human being. Absolutely. I never want anything to happen to you, but we are not responsible for them. And until we grasp that, until we get that in our core, in our heart, in our mind, we can't move forward because we're living in fear. So where do we start? You know, I I just couldn't leave you with understanding why boundaries are important, but not giving you a way to move forward. Because I said every time we sat down and talked, I wanted you to think, I wanted to give you something to think about. And I'm not saying that you have to believe everything I say, but I want you to, at least with an open mind, think about everything I say and maybe how it applies to you if it does. But I don't just want to leave you with thinking. I want you to be able to walk away and implement something if you feel that it's for you. So I want you to understand why boundaries are important, but I want you to also be able to move forward. So today, I want to leave you with two questions. And have you figured out that a lot of times my thoughts are for you to think and answer some questions, right? From our conversation today, what are some boundaries you see would benefit you if you had them in your life right now? Tell me. And I'd love to see in your comments any that you thought that maybe now's the time to erect those boundaries. And the second question is, why don't you have those boundaries in place right now? What has kept you from implementing them? Was it low self esteem, not feeling you were worth, not feeling your value? Was it people pleasing, which also goes back to your worth, but also wanting to be accepted, needed, wanted? Was it unrealistic expectations or beliefs? As a woman, I'm supposed to. As a man, I'm supposed to. As a child, it is expected that. I ask you, were you told this? And look at who told you this. But not only that, is it true? Is that true? Just because it's the way that it always has been doesn't mean that it's the way that it always has to be. Is it neediness? Is it neediness, wanting to be needed, feeling that if someone needs you, they love you? That's a lie. And then finally, was it fear of backlash? Not wanting to deal with someone else's anger, not wanting to deal with someone else's anxiety, not wanting to deal with anything like that. Tell me, was it fear of backlash and not wanting to be confrontational? So I'm glad you were here and able to hang out with me today for our ringside chat. You are amazing. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit subscribe. And, it's just that I want to keep in contact with you, and I'd love to see you again. And let me know if there's anything that I can help you do after listening to this episode. Visit masteringyourmonday.com/pathway, and that's where you'll find my free gift for you. It's actually a download that I put together with just one page of all my techniques to add gratitude to your life. Remember, we talked about taking care of yourself and making sure you get that peace? Well, that's a way. Until next time, take care. I want to thank you for listening to the Mastering Your Monday podcast. I hope you learned at least one tip or technique you can walk away with and implement today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show, and let us know how much you enjoyed it and what you learned from this episode. We honor your time and your commitment to Mastering Your Monday podcast. And as always, we want to remind you, you are cherished, respected, valued, and in control. See you on the next episode.